Hey, Uncle Doug.
Uncle Dan.
What? I was gonna fix a sandwich for myself, and I like various meats, various kinds of toppings, and I was wondering if you had anything you could recommend.
Well, there is one particular animal where every single piece of it tastes delicious.
Oh, okay. Is that an ossifrage?
That's a turkey. Try the beak.
I'm relieved you didn't say human this time.
This time,
right?
We've talked about. Well, I can recommend something, and if you'd been in the right place, my goodness, you could have had all the pork you wanted on that sandwich. But
that does sound enticing.
Right. So now it's time for the How to Heretic Farm Report. We're going to talk about animal husbandry and doing it poorly. So it's funny. We talked about the Good Shepherd a few weeks back, didn't we? And it was we determined that it was a shitty shepherd. Like it was not
worst shepherd
good
ever.
Animal husbandry.
Right. Exactly.
Well, I'm going to tell you about the shitty swine herd. So, gents, here in our weekly affirmation radio hour, we talk from time to time about the miracles in the one true book, the so-called Bible.
Yeah.
Your walkings on water, your breads and your fishes, your raisings of the deads, etc., etc.
Sure.
But what we failed to say directly is that the only truly miraculous property of the Bible is that somehow zillions of fine people still believe it's true. So Hosanna, an actual miracle indeed. So today I want to explore one of the least discussed, but I think most staggeringly significant of the biblical miracles among all the card tricks and sleights of the stigmated hand. And I submit that this weird, horrible, and almost forgotten miracle is so hugely significant, I think because it plays a significant role in the dire situation we now face in the Anthropocene age, and what is looking inescapably like the reality of this planet's sixth great extinction. To quote Michael Fassbender's David in 2012's unfortunately terrible film Prometheus, big things have small beginnings. So, buried in the 5th chapter of the best book of the Bible, Mark, as it was obviously named after me, is a weird story about demonic possession and a clearly mentally ill man in desperate need of help.
I'm going to interrupt you, by the way, just to say that at some point you and I are doing a showdown where it is Daniel versus Mark, and we're gonna figure out which is the best book in the Bible.
I get to sit as judge of that competition.
That's right.
Yeah, you are. You can defend the book of Douglas.
Nobody cares about the book of Doug.
Not the least of all me.
Well, actually, in Daniel, there's at least a story, right? Something fucking happens.
There's a few stories there. It's pretty exciting. Yeah. There's lions.
There's a weird
and
dream. Yeah, all that shit. So, in Mark, in this weird story of demonic possession, which Jesus does help this poor soul with his crazy Messiah magic by orchestrating a mass extermination of perfectly innocent animals.
Right.
This, dear uncles, is the miracle of the Gadarene Swine.
Woo!
Yeah. Now, do you guys remember this one in Sunday school?
I do.
Yeah-ish.
Only because of how terrible it is.
I don't remember it at all, and that may be because in our 53-hour Mormon Sunday services, my brain was trying to kill itself by holding its breath. It was so bored with the ceaseless droning. So it may have been mentioned.
I think I remember it from seminary. I don't think it ever got, when I was a teenager. I don't think it was ever taught to me when I was, sub-teen, pre-puberty.
Right. Well, that's milk before pork, right? So it's you were ready. Sorry, non-Mormons. So I don't remember it because, I think I would, because they never shut the fuck up about the rest of Jesus's miracles. And I don't know, maybe it's just, this is such a dark and witchcrafty sort of miracle. Maybe they just thought it was too frightening for young ears, like you were saying, Doug. So Anyway, so this critical story that is a kernel of so much needless suffering in the world is so short, I can read it in its entirety to the folks at home in under 2 minutes. I, Mark, shall quote the person who wrote Mark, but was not Mark, here in the King James Version, and I quote, "They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gadarenes, and when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one could bind him, not even with chains, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been pulled apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces. Neither could anyone tame him. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones.
Oh, my God.
It's just a beautiful book, isn't it?
He's the neighborhood loony.
Yeah, he's a sick man. And so when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshipped him. And he cried out with a loud voice and said, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God that you do not torment me." Why would he torment him? So anyway,
this is such classic schizophrenic stuff. Mm-hmm. This is just a man who needs some psychiatric
he needs some help. And I'll get to it. And so, for he said to him, "Come out of the man, unclean spirit." Then he asked, "What is your name?" And he answered, saying, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Also, he begged him earnestly that he would not send him out of the country. Okay. Now a large herd of swine was feeding there near the mountains. So all the demons begged him, saying, "Send us to the swine that we may enter them." And at once Jesus gave them permission. Then the unclean spirits went out and entered the swine. There were about 2,000. And the herd ran violently down the steep place into the sea and drowned in the sea. So those who fed the swine, and they told it in the city and in the country, and they went out to see what it was that had happened. Then they came to Jesus and saw the one who had been demon-possessed and had had the legion sitting and clothed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. And those who saw it told them how it happened to him who had been demon-possessed and about the swine. Then they began to plead with him to depart from their region.
Please leave. Can you please?
And it was Jesus they wanted to leave,
right?
Not the wild man, right?
Well, that's okay. He's got a whole flotilla of pigs he can ride away.
He just killed all of their food.
Right. All right, sweetie, that's enough stories for tonight. Go to bed.
Exactly right. So, was that version too long for you, my beloved co-uncles? Well, here it is in another book called Matthew, but not written by Matthew. And I quote, "When he came to the other side, to the country of the Gadarenes, 2 demoniacs," that's a real word. Demoniacs, people possessed, coming out of the tombs, met him. They were so fierce that no one could pass that way. Suddenly they shouted, "What have you to do with us, Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time?" Now a large herd of swine was feeding at some distance from them. The demons begged him, "If you cast us out, send us into the herd of swine." And he said to them, "Go." So they came out and entered the swine, and suddenly the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea and perished in the water. The swineherds ran off, and going into the town, they told the whole story about what had happened to the demoniacs. Then the whole town came out and to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they begged him to leave their neighborhood. The end. So
I just want to know, why are these demons so eager to jump into pigs and drown themselves?
I don't know. It sounds like they were desperate not to be cast out without any kind of body, right?
Well, in that one, but in the other one, they were just like, "Hey, do me a big solid and get me into those pigs, will ya?"
Yeah, it was this weird negotiation. Like that. Why didn't they just haunt the pigs in the first place?
Right, exactly. It's like the guy who was able to break metal with his bare arms or whatever was also able to trap a legion of demons inside of himself on purpose.
Right. Becoming a demoniac.
So in Mark there was 1, in Matthew there were 2 possessed people.
Correcto.
So they don't line up exactly. That's
which is a first in the Gospels. So
we'll end up talking about things in the Bible lining up in the next segment. So anyway.
We'll get to that show.
Yeah.
So I mean, why tell a story once when you can tell a substantially different version of it twice in the same perfect inerrant book written by the creator of the universe, who also knows every time you get a boner. But if that was not conclusive, it appears again in a book not written by a guy called Luke that is almost exactly copied from the one not written by a guy called Mark. I won't bore you with it. It's the same story, kind of. So, okay, the Bible's stupid. Internally incoherent editorial problems aside, this is a terrible story for a couple reasons. The suffering man in question was mentally or emotionally unwell. And obviously in Bronze Age Judea, nobody knew what the fuck being mentally ill really was, nor what to do about it.
Well, they knew what to do.
So,
You tie him up with chains.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Chain him up where the pigs eat. So any abnormal behavior was devils or witches' curses, right? So in a way, the ancient storytellers are kind of off the hook. But it's the people in 2019 that should know full well that someone suffering like the man in this story needed real help, not a mass pig slaughter orchestrated by a weird, blonde, blue-eyed rabbi, and they should stop thinking what happened in this scenario is okay. So fuck you for thinking there's a moral to the story of fucking with a disturbed person and somehow mass murdering animals wholesale for no fucking reason. That is not moral.
2,000 pigs.
Now wait a minute.
2,000 pigs.
You are asking me to believe that Jesus Christ himself can't accurately diagnose a demoniac? I say nay.
I disagree with you, sir. Well, show your work. But
so it sounds to me like this was some other story that predates the Bible. That
like
Mark,
most of them, yes.
Yeah, that Mark wanted to find a way to kind of...
To add Jesus in.
Yeah, to get Jesus into the story, but it's ghastly.
Well, also...
Yeah, it's like ancient witchcraft kind of thing.
It's the scapegoat idea, right? It's this idea that like all the bad things are now in the pigs and this guy's off the hook. And this leads to a whole bunch of bad ideas, including now Haredi, like ultra-Orthodox Jewish people...
Doing kaparot.
Spinning chickens over their head and whipping all of their sins into that bad boy instead of keeping them for themselves.
Yeah. So the other significantly more horrible part of this is obviously the idea that casually destroying 2,000 animals as a remedy for a non-existent demon possession is perfectly acceptable. Just from the most material point of view, how many people can 2,000 pigs feed in a shit-poor, desperate, hot part of the ancient world? If you guessed a lot, you are correct. Now, as most listeners will know, pigs are considered dirty, shitty garbage animals, as laid out in the most wonderful book of the Bible, Leviticus, as we discussed in episode number 9. But in addition to pigs being unclean and therefore inedible, so are owls, ossifrages, as Dan mentioned, oysters, ostriches, eagles, greater owls, weasels, and lesser owls. But crickets and grasshoppers are fine. And just in Leviticus alone, the gruesome, ritualistic, sadistic wasting of animal life in pointless, stupid sacrifice to an empty sky is nightmarish enough. So the Jewish religious prohibitions on consuming pork obviously factor into this awful, old, and not true story. And if this awful, old, untrue story was seen as just that, then it wouldn't matter enough for us to be talking about it today. But despite it being one of the less repeated of Jesus' so-called miracles these days, it got traction with the worst people in the Christian sphere at the right time. Now, we've talked about the truly diabolical Augustine of Hippo on this show before, when we did our two-part segment on hell in episodes 76 and 77. But to recap, this 4th century piece of shit was one of the early cheerleaders of the fully fabricated idea of eternal hell and all its fiery punishments for the people he hated, which was everybody. So he and another monster, Thomas Aquinas, took the stupid miracle myth to mean that human beings had exactly zero responsibility to the well-being of any other form of life on this earth, and that doing so was akin to Satanism. So I will quote the wonderful St. Augustine here. Christ himself shows that to refrain from the killing of animals and the destroying of plants is the height of superstition. For judging that there are no common rights between us and the beasts and trees, he sent the devils into a herd of swine, and with a curse withered the tree on which he found no fruit. That latter bit referring to Jesus killing a fig tree for the crime of being out of season.
Right.
Another one of his fucked up murder miracles.
No, that one's fair. Fuck that tree.
Yeah, fair. And that's a true story. I mean, we know that one's true.
Right.
So 900 years later, a no more enlightened Aquinas would write, if in Holy Scripture there are found some injunctions forbidding the infliction of some cruelty towards brute animals, this is either for removing a man's mind from exercising cruelty towards other men, or because the injury inflicted on animals turns to a temporal loss for some man. So what he's saying basically is animal life exists only as sustenance or forced labor for humans and has no intrinsic value of its own. And obviously the critical nature of biodiversity for human survival was not even a concept the writers of God's perfect book were capable of grasping. So this has led to 2,000 plus years of countless good Christians believing that all wild and domestic animals exist only for human consumption, toil, or cruel entertainment. It has also led to the Christian belief that animals are unable to even experience pain or fear, let alone possess any emotional or familial complexity. And while you might want to shrug off the writings of Augustine and Aquinas as ancient ramblings of old monks, these were and remain enormously influential figures in the Christian sphere, casting a long dark shadow across the world even to this day.
Totally.
So,
yeah, of course they do.
What they said about the mindless utility of animals infects the recesses of the Christian mind, regardless of denomination. And if this stupid story of Jesus sending a small town of demons to haunt suicidal pigs and all the Catholic sadists finding justification in the New Testament story aren't enough, let us travel to where the Christian heart really dwells, the Old Testament. I've said before, and I believe it to my marrow, said on the show, the soul of the American Christian resides in the fetid killing fields of the Old Testament. They just find the New Testament useful if polite company's coming over, like, putting out the nice china and washing the blood off their hands for a few uncomfortable hours a week. And it's right at the beginning of the Old Testament that the OG justification for the brutal, thoughtless annihilation of the creatures we share this earth with can be found, Genesis 1:26. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, which is my new favorite word, creepeth. They had to be very specific about what creeping things do.
Yes. If you see a creeping thing that's just sort of meandering or moseying, you leave that alone. Only the ones that
creepeth.
It must creepeth.
What a different world we'd be in if the translator had used the word responsible instead of dominion. Man was responsible for all the creatures of the earth.
Right. Instead, it's just like, fuck it. Just do anything you want.
Yeah.
Well, I read that about the Dominion, and I get really mad that these beasts are not obeying my orders.
Oh, but if you think you're frustrated, try having cats. Right? So Doug and I know that pain firsthand. So
exactly.
I
have dominion over you, bitch. Dominion.
Get up out of that little sunny spot and obey. So the typical background rate for species extinction pre-Anthropocene, which is basically the age of humans, was 1 to 5 species a year. We're now losing a couple dozen a day. There are cautious estimations of possibly 30 to 50% of all species currently on Earth being gone in 30 years.
We don't need them.
Yeah, why are they so delicious if that's obscene? Right. Right. So obviously there are factors outside the weird influence of the Gadarene swine and Christian numbness to any pain other than their own. There's the inescapable reality of catastrophic climate change, horrendous oceanic pollution and overexploitation, and the hideous, inexcusable plague of quack Chinese medicine and its demand for tiger penises, rhino horns, seal penises, the nightmarish cruelty of captive bile bears, and on and on. And look, full disclosure, and I think you guys would probably join me in this, I'm not speaking from much of a moral high ground here.
I was going to say, is this the day that we learn that Mark is a vegan now?
The night I started researching this segment, I failed to realize the incredible irony of the pork chop I made for dinner. That's true. And while I've been a vegetarian off and on for decades, I've never been a vegan. I'm not even arguing that one has to be a vegetarian or a vegan to live an ethical life, necessarily. I think it's always possible to be a more ethical omnivore, or at least to consider the origins of what we consume, because everybody's got to find their own philosophical path to the plate. And if not, I'm nothing if not an ethical hypocrite on this subject. But we in the West should understand the roots of our feedlots and our veal pens and our debeaked chickens who aren't allowed to stand up for their miserable lives, or dogfights, or our fucking white assholes in their trophy hunting. And our general nihilism towards animals has its roots in the good fucking book.
Right.
And a half-forgotten, stupid story about a poor sick man and a magic rabbi killing 2,000 pigs for no reason. So when I quoted David from Prometheus saying big things have small beginnings, this is what I meant, that stupid fables from a Bronze Age backwater are still poisoning the world thousands of years later, and I think that's a bad thing. So,
well, I hear your message loud and clear, Uncle Mark, and I'm going to take it to heart. And the next time I have a ham sandwich, I am going to cast a devil into it.
yes,
I'm going to salt mine with my tears while I eat it.
I wonder if this has anything to do with that. Remember that canned deviled ham? Remember that Underwood?
Oh, yeah.
Deviled ham.
Could that be a connection here? Have we blown the lid off something?
We have, absolutely. Jesus cast the devil into that ham.
And then Jews.
Yeah, I want to go grocery shopping with David Icke and see how he responds to a can of deviled ham.
I saw the devil with Goody Proctor's bacon.
It's all coming together. So that's the Gadarene Swine, boys.
I do like in that story though how in all three versions, the people were like, you know what, you got to go.
Please leave,
Jesus. You got to go.
Please leave, Jesus
Isn't that
Christ.
weird?
Yeah.
Like, that's super weird. It's like, yeah, you're fucking spooky, dude. Get out of here. No, those people had it right.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, get thee behind me, Jesus. Let's move on.
Let's move on.